with me on week 10. We have some good players for you to kind of talk about. What I want to jump in is talk about the trending players on Sleeper. So we're going to jump into Sleeper HQ, talk about those players, and go from there. If you have any questions or comments below, please post them so we can go over them for you guys. So let's get into the trending players on Sleeper and talk about those quarterbacks. First up, Cooper Rush. I don't have to say it. Super flex only. If you want him, you can roster him if you have Dak Prescott. But realistically, what's the scenario you're going to start him, right? It seems very, very unlikely. So we're going to move along to the second trending quarterback on Sleeper, and that's Taysom Hill. He will be in our tight end segment of this episode, so stick with us a little bit as we talk about him. But the thing about Taysom Hill is you can play him in quarterback spots. So if you have Superflex League, another guy that you could stream there, or if you're extremely desperate in deeper leagues, Taysom Hill is a very viable option for you. The third guy, Daniel Jones. He is the headline of this show. We will talk about Daniel Jones in a minute as to why he's the headline for the show. Scott, the downgrade is pretty bad. I just picked up Lamb in a Pirate League where this is one of my worst teams, but I won this league. I had Demario Douglas. I swapped him for Lamb. It's hard to really quantify it for Lamb, but if you go back to in 2022 when he had Cooper Rush as his quarterback, the target share was good. Everything was there. The offense was just down. So he drops down into kind of that wide receiver 2 range with some upside. We'll see how the offense goes. They're just not going to score that many points, right? I think the bigger guy that takes the hit is Rico Dowdle because his offense is just going to struggle to move. So if they can't score points, they can't move. He takes bigger hit. At least Lamb's still going to get his target share because you know that, and they don't really have another option on that offense. I mean, they wanted to add option. They brought in Jonathan Mingo, but Jonathan Mingo is a nothing burger, aka like don't waste your time with Jonathan Mingo. So they're trying to upgrade that wide receiver 2 spot, wide receiver 3 spot. They're waiting for Brady Cooks to come back, but overall, it's not the best for Lamb. We'll just say that. So if you had high-end wide receiver 1 aspirations for Lamb, at this point you just have to drop it. So kind of is what it is, but that's where the Cowboys offense is at. And without Dak Prescott, this is kind of creates a bigger issue for that offense as a whole and that team as a whole. Because like we talked about it on yesterday's show, they should just throw on the white flag, tank, because they're not going to make the playoffs. Like the defense isn't good enough to support them, which they did 2 years ago. The defense carried them. So that's kind of is what it is. I'm going to jump to our next guy, which is Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford has absolutely been balling out. With those 2 healthy wide receivers, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, the offense is just taking it to a whole nother level. We've seen the last 2 weeks against the Vikings and the Seahawks that he's just been really efficient. He's been good. He's getting those passing touchdowns. And with a player like Stafford who is immobile, he does not run. I think the most rushing attempts he's had is 3 in a game, and those are like kneel downs. So you kind of know what you're getting from Stafford. He's just playing at a just ridiculous level. So love to see that. And the 5th guy at quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers. That Aaron Rodgers is kind of a similar bet. The offense is taking a step forward, and they're moving in the right direction. We saw first time since week 3 they hit over 20 points against Houston Texans. He was okay against the Patriots at 17 fantasy points. Next up, he gets Arizona and Indianapolis. So it's just that's wheels up for those guys. Let's go to the next position. Talk about the running backs. Khalil Herbert, big riser because he's taking on that Zach Moss role. Now, he can't pass protect like Zach Moss, so it's really going to be interesting to see how this plays out for him. But he's a guy that I mentioned in the Waiver Wire article, which y'all should check out on the website, fantasyfootballuniverse.com, and kind of see how this plays out because we all love Chase Brown. Chase Brown's been really good. He saw every touch. It was like 32 opportunities last week. That's not going to hold up. That's super unrealistic for Chase Brown. He's a smaller back. He's explosive, right? But you bring in Khalil Herbert to kind of take some of that off. He's more than likely going to get the goal line looks in this offense because that's who he is. And he's just a plus rusher, right? He's not really anything in the passing game. So I think Chase Brown just takes the goal, the rush attempts really just work away from him. So overall, like super exciting. Cam Akers, we think he has finally passed Ty Chandler in the offense. So we'll see how that goes for him. But Ty Chandler was the RB2. Now, guess what? They traded for Cam Akers. It took him a few weeks. But now he's the RB2 in the Vikings offense behind Aaron Jones. So it's more or less a handcuff stash, right? When you get to him. If an injury happens to Aaron Jones, that's where it goes, right? Like that's kind of the upside scenario for him. But he's kind of a guy in like deep leagues you want to stash. Rico Dowdle, I don't know why he's the 3rd trending player on Sleeper at running back. Yeah, he had his best game of the year. The problem is the offense, like what I was talking about. So I'm not really going to pound the table for Rico Dowdle. He's at 72% rostered. If you have him, you kind of have him. But the key thing is like some of these matchups are not that bad. You get Philadelphia, you get Houston, you get Washington, the Giants the next 4, right? Like that's entirely fantasy points. You can make it work. It's just he's more of an RB3 with RB2 upside based on how bad the Cowboys offense has been because with Cooper Rush, like you're just not going to score a lot of points. You're not going to get a lot of yards, and that hurts your running back, right? Because if you're taking away touchdowns, those are monumental aspects of points. Like you see guys like Derrick Henry and those guys pushing over 20 touchdowns, like they don't have to get the receiving work, right? Because of that. So we'll see how involved Rico Dowdle is, and they're also going to bring Ezekiel Elliott back. It's probably going to limit his upside too. So we shall see. The last guy I kind of want to talk about in the trending up running backs is Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren is the middle tier, like peak player to go get because they have two matchups where they're going to be underdogs in both of those games coming up. They are playing after the bye week. They're playing Washington. They're playing Baltimore. They're going to be underdogs in both of those games. What does that mean? Jaylen Warren is going to be the guy getting the majority of snaps, and if possibly the majority touches in these games because they're going to be trailing throughout. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out for him. I think he could be a flex play for you. That's kind of what he's been, but I think he gets a little bit more upside with a higher floor in this scenario. So those are the running backs. The top 5 trending wide receivers we're going to go to. Quentin Johnston. He really had a broken play. I don't want to talk too much about Quentin Johnston. We'll talk to him a little bit. Demarcus Robinson's another guy we'll talk about and why Demarcus Robinson's the top guy in the lowest tier of wide receivers available and why we like Demarcus Robinson. Newsflash, he did it last year. He's doing it again this year because those healthy wide receivers in front of him, making life so much easier. The next guy is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. I really don't know why people are rostering Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Like the offense is really bad, and guess who they're playing this week? They're playing the Chargers. Like I get it. It's Ridley. There's no one else. It's just no thank you against Chargers. I'm not interested in Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Noah Brown, you could do it with Noah Brown. He's at back-to-back games with 6 targets. But, like, it's really difficult. It's a narrow edge for him. The bonus is they have Jaden Daniels, right? So, like, with Jaden Daniels as your quarterback, the offense is better. You take a shot and see how it works out if you're in these deeper leagues. And the 5th guy, Juwan Jennings, he's only rostered 60% of leagues. We have seen how good he's been for the 49ers this year. I know Debo's dealing with an injury. We talk about Pearsall coming back. I like Pearsall a lot, but, like, you just want offensive pieces in these really good offenses, right? And Jennings fits that to a T. He's been really good when he's been healthy. So if you can stash Jennings or you can pick him up, like I would happily do that. Tight ends, it's a very narrow bucket of tight ends. The trending up guys are all the guys we're going to talk about. Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki without T. Higgins is awesome. Mike Gesicki with T. Higgins on the field is terrible. That's basically the thesis for the Mike Gesicki play. Next guy up, Taysom Hill. We just talked about Taysom Hill. We'll talk about a little bit. The third guy, Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith's been actually really good with like this offense, how it's changed. They're not featuring the wide receivers. They're featuring the running back, a.k.a. Devon Achane. They're featuring the tight end, Jonnu Smith. So we'll see how this goes, but it's a Tua Tagovailoa offense. The offense is a lot better than it was previously. So we'll see overall, but it's worth stashing. Hunter Henry is just a guy that just continues to get undervalued. 40% rostered. His last 4 games, he's had at least 5 targets. He's had at least 3 receptions, and he's had at least 41 yards in all of those games. Now, it's hard for him to hit the floor because he's Hunter Henry. Like, it's not the high-profile player, but he is a lower-profile option for you. And the last guy's Cade Otton. Like, Cade Otton is a turtle at this point. From being a roster clogger to tight end 1, that's what we're talking about with Cade Otton. We saw against the Chiefs. This is why we said you had to get Cade Otton. It was the ideal matchup, and what's he do? He gets 8 receptions, 77 yards, a touchdown. Like, that's at tight end. That's fan-freaking-tastic. So let's kind of go to what we talk about on the waiver wire quarterbacks and why we're mentioning those guys. I'm going to take you to our article and why we're mentioning them. So the first guys are in the deeper league options. It's Daniel Jones. Now, Daniel Jones has not been great. He is averaging 14 points per game, 26 points per game on that basis. But his schedule is just, it's as Randy Moss says, a straight cash on me. It is absolutely ridiculous what his schedule is. There is one good matchup in there. Outside of that, there is none. So this is why, I think Daniel Jones should stop by on this list because we'll talk about this here in a second. Give me 1 second as I stall and I find the list because I have it written down and I just cannot find it. But if you want to look at his schedule, I will bring it up for you. So give me 1 second here and we will talk about this. So Daniel Jones, he plays Carolina, one of the worst off defenses in the NFL. Bye. He gets Tampa Bay, Dallas, New Orleans, Baltimore, Atlanta, Indianapolis to round out the season. There's one bad matchup in those. The rest of the 6 are bottom 22 or better. So if you're looking for cheap production at the quarterback play, Daniel Jones is the guy to get. I know it's ugly. I see your posting on. We'll talk about that when we get to wide receivers. They're kind of in between. But I really like. It's kind of like we have big worries about that offense with his role he's going to play with Deontay. So we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to wide receivers. Stick with this. I'm going to hit running backs first, and then we'll talk about wide receivers. We'll do a big thing on Deontay because Deontay's good, but like his role just seems super sketchy. We don't know how it's going to play out. So I'm more TBD on Deontay. I saw Fancy Pro say you should drop him. I'm not there with Deontay. He's still a very good NFL player. I think he's better than Bateman. He does a different skill set than Zay Flowers. It's just like, it's really him and Andrews. But we'll talk about the quarterbacks a little bit more. The other guys in this tier besides Daniel Jones, Drake May, you know what the rushing profile is. He's had 17 points in his last 3 games. He's a really good quarterback. And when you just want to bet in these rushing quarterbacks that are young, they're mobile, that can make plays, that's Drake May. He elevates the floor and the ceiling of that offense. They're going to be heavily reliant upon him because there's not that much skill talent around him, right? You have Jameis Winston, he's at 10% rostered. You kind of know the Jameis Winston experience. It's going to be super up or down. Their pass rate above expectation is phenomenal. It's like plus 4%. They had the highest pass rate in the NFL. They pass a ton, so the volume's going to be there. It's just more. It's hard to hit that ceiling against these matchups. Joe Flacco, it's a similar scenario with Joe Flacco. It's just a worse situation, worse offense. So with Joe Flacco, it's kind of just up and down, right? And the last guy in this tier is Bryce Young. He's 8% rostered. You're really just desperate if you're looking for the Bryce Young range. So that's it. We're gonna go to the medium league options. Bo Nix, we talked about this with Bo Nix. He was QB 15 even in the matchup against the Ravens. And it was a good matchup, but the Ravens really dominated, but that shows you the floor of Bo Nix, right? So you go from there. He's averaged 21.28 points per game in the last 5, which if you put that on the points per game basis the whole season, that's QB floor. I get it. The Kansas City matchup is not good. So you kind of want to wait with Bo Nix because they're playing them. But after that, it lightens up because it's Atlanta, Vegas, and Cleveland, who are all 19th or worse in points per game allowed. This is why we like Bo Nix. I'm going to pause here, take this question. Lost Olave, who would you pick up from this pot of gold? Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins. I'm going to stop you right now. It's DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins slots into the ideal situation role with his talent. There's an intermediate guy. He's going to get a lot of those targets. You saw 8 receptions, 8 targets, like flawless, got a touchdown. He really raises the floor of that Kansas City offense. Now, it was the ideal matchup, but with all of these guys, I really like Leggett, Jordan Addison, Michael Pittman. Like, you can make the case for a lot of these guys. Jalen Waddle, like, he's just not the focal point of the offense. Like, his target share and everything's plummeted this year. So I like Amari Cooper. I just need to see it, and that's the whole big issue with him. So for me, it's DeAndre Hopkins. If you can't get DeAndre Hopkins, then we're talking about Amari Cooper. We're talking about Xavier Leggett. We're talking about Michael Pittman, Jordan Addison, one of those guys. I have Jalen Waddle on that tier of guys, but like the thing with Jalen Waddle is always going to be more expensive because he has the name cachet attached to him, right? So instead of spending up for Jalen Waddle, I would go target the cheaper guys like the Xavier Leggett's, the Michael Pittmans, the Juwan Jennings of the world. Go that route because that's going to work out really well for you, I think. Because Waddle just doesn't give us the ceiling, and he's more of like a boom bust wide receiver. It's not great. It's not great. So I am sorry it's lagging a little bit. Some of the technical difficulties, but we're trying to power through it. As you see, I'm at the diabetic clinic. As we're here, needles in. So this is kind of what's going on today. But we're still doing the show, because we want to bring it to you guys. So that's where we're going. But yeah, back to this Bo Nix that I was talking about. He just he's good for fantasy, is what I will say. He's not the best quarterback in the world. That's not what we're saying. But for fantasy points for Bo Nix, you know what you're getting. Also in this tier, and the other guy that I really like is Justin Herbert, who's at 46% rostered. Trevor Lawrence at 41% rostered. Aaron Rodgers at 47% rostered. Russell Wilson at 24% rostered. And if you want to throw a deep sleeper, if you think Anthony Richardson's going to get the job back, he's at 42% rostered. You could do the Anthony Richardson scene if you want to kind of stash him in deep leagues, right? You could do that. I'm not really interested in it. It seems like a roster space, but the upside's there. It's going to lure someone if he has a good game. His value is gone. Now we're going to go to shallow league options. The players and rostered in at least 50% to the 75% of rosters. Sam Darnold, man. Sam Darnold's been awesome. And what he gets is the Jacksonville Jaguars, the best matchup of any defense for fantasy quarterbacks. They are allowing 21.7 points per game. I mean, that's where he's at. And the Jaguars, on the other hand, are giving up 26.7 points per game to quarterbacks. It's an absurd number. So, yeah, man. Good luck with the pickup. I hope you get him. If not, I will say Juwan Jennings, I like him. I think his role is more secure. Quentin Johnston had basically a broken play touchdown last week. I know people like the Chargers offense, and they have really good matchups and stuff. I kind of want to see it with Quentin Johnston. It's the Lamb McConkey show, and Quentin Johnston's the second piece. It really just depends on how you prefer these offenses. I'm going to shoot my shot with Juwan Jennings because I think he's good. But my whole thesis with the San Francisco offense is I want one of those guys. I want those position players. Brock Purdy's done a really good job supporting it. With Herbert, he's starting to get healthy. The offense is kicking forward and going there. You could do it with Quentin Johnson if you want to. I'm not as convinced of the talent on Quentin Johnson. That's been my biggest issue with him. But I think like you should make a claim for both of these guys and see how it plays out. If I have to pick and choose, I'm going to go Juwan Jennings, Quentin Johnson. Would I drop Dontavian Wicks or Alec Pierce for Mike Williams? Not particularly, because this is the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I mean, you could. I don't mind. I think it's a similar bet. I'll say that because Dontavian Wicks is just super boom bust. Alec Pierce with Joe Flacco is like you can drop for sure. Like I would drop Alec Pierce just because I don't see much happening right in that offense. They're going to pass a lot. I think Mike Williams gives you a better shot, but the thing is he's not going to be George Pickens. George Pickens is a better receiver at this point in time. He just gives you more of what Mike Williams does, and they're actually very similar wide receivers, right? They do the same thing. They both are big body contested catch downfield threats, and you can go there and do that. For me personally, I'll go Mike Williams or Alec Pierce. I think it's a coin toss between him and Dontavian Wicks. It really depends what you want to do on that, and if you want to go for like the quote unquote wide receiver 2 of Pittsburgh. He's just not going to be like, he's not going to push Pickens. It's really hard to support multiple assets in the offense, which is why I'm not making a big case for Mike Williams. But if you want to do the Mike Williams thing, I think you're kind of in a similar range of players. So I don't mind chasing it because it's a lot easier for him to be the wide receiver 2 than like Alec Pierce, who has competition from Pittman and Downs in Indianapolis, or Dontavian Wicks, who's battling with what seems like 8 guys in Green Bay, right? Like you have the 4 wide receivers. Dontavian Wicks is super boom bust. The floor is 0 with him. I think that's the biggest issue. Do I trade Henry for Wilson and Nakua? I'm assuming this is Russell Wilson. Oh, excuse me, Henry and Olave. Well, Olave's not going to play. Like it could be a month till we get Olave. Like I'm treating his concussion similar to how the concussions worked out for Tua, where they put him on the IR. He's had a lot of concussions last few years, so they're going to be very careful with him because he's their prize asset on offense, right? He's a young player, still on his rookie deal. So I really like Nakua. Who's it's Garrett Wilson. Yeah, I would do that. As long as you have the running back depth, I'm making that move because I love Puka. He's a top 10 option for me moving forward. Like Derrick Henry is great. Derrick Henry's been really good. But you're getting a massive upgrade from basically Garrett Wilson to not having a wide receiver. So you're getting a high-end wide receiver 2 in this deal. I'm fine doing that deal as long as you have the running back depth, right? I think that's the biggest key for this whole thing. If you don't have it, then don't make the deal. But if you have the running back depth, you can totally do it. We're going to go to Ryan's question here. Give me 1 second to get off this. Okay. Went from wanting to drop Philly's defense and starting CeeDee Lamb, Ferguson, and Dowdle to starting Philly's defense. No, you're not overreacting at all. Like, you're going to want to attack this Cowboys offense as long as Dak Prescott is not the quarterback, because it's just not going to do much of anything. And with Cooper Rush, he's not a good quality quarterback. There's turnovers and all that things happen because the line's atrocious. Like, they can't run. They can't pass block. It's really a bad situation in Dallas right now. The only guy I'm really confidently playing is CeeDee Lamb, if he even plays. Like, you have to start Lamb just because he's going to get an insane target share with his backup quarterback, because backup quarterbacks target the number 1 option at an insanely high rate because they can't make the checkdowns as read like a Dak Prescott. He can't go 1, 2, 3. They're going to go 1 and get the ball out. That's how it usually goes to backup quarterback. So we've seen Cooper Rush, the floor, it just lowers the floor and ceiling. I would happily do Philly's defense this week against the Cowboys. I think that's fine. Zay Flowers really depends what you can get. If someone's viewing him as like a borderline wide receiver 1, yeah, I'm trading him for that cost. It's really hard with the Ravens offense because Lamar runs so much for him to consistently be that option. It really comes also, the second part of this is Deontay Johnson, right? Because they have Deontay coming into the fold and seeing how many targets he earns, because he's been a target earner his entire career. Now, we're seeing a bunch of people saying his role is going to be super boom bust, and I don't necessarily believe that. So that's why I'm saying if you can get a top 12-ish price for Zay Flowers, you can move him for a high-end running back. Yeah, happily do that. But if someone's going to give you like a mid-range wide receiver 2 or a back-end RB2, I'm just kind of well, hold on. You could do a thing where you maybe see if you can get Chase Brown in a deal. I don't mind taking a shot on Chase Brown in that situation because the offense is going to be entirely dependent on him. But also he has the issue of Khalil Herbert coming in kind of knocking down the floor and ceiling a little bit. So I think it's similar. It just really depends on how you view Flowers. If you think he's top 12, yeah, move him. If not, I keep. Let's see. Yeah, I think you're probably fine. Yeah. So basically, you have ARSB. You have BTJ. You don't really need a wide receiver. You don't need a wide receiver because you have 3 high-impact wide receivers, right? You have BTJ. I really like BTJ. He's a borderline wide receiver 1. He's more like a mid-range wide receiver 2. ARSB, I know it's kind of come down his target share and everything this year, but he's a super, super high floor guy. And McLaurin's He's a back-end wide receiver 1 from what we've seen. If he's more like a boom bust like wide receiver 1, or he's a high-end wide receiver 2 with the upside of wide receiver 1. But overall, yeah, like it really depends, like because you're basically flexing. The Olave was the guy you're flexing, right? Because you got Brown, you got Cook, you got CMC, but you have CMC entering this team. So it really just depends how you value Garrett Wilson in this deal, and if you think it's worth it to like do that. I think Puka Nacua is an upgrade over. Like I think he's basically borderline your wide receiver. That's what you get. So I think it's really close. I don't mind doing this deal, to tell you the truth. It's just, are you okay giving up Henry and losing that high-end producer? Because it's really hard for like even Nacua to kind of match him on a points per game basis. I think that's the biggest issue. If you want to do it, go for it. If not, that's where it's at. So it's a close deal based on your roster because I don't think you really have a need but like the thing is you don't want to be starting Bucky. Bucky's that flex guy who gives you like, weekly kind of running back 3, running back 2 production because he's involved in a good offense and he has a decent role, but like Rachaad White caps him. That's the hard part. I like James Cook a lot, but like we saw last week, Ray Davis cut into his usage. And if he's not getting all the work, it's really hard, especially if he's in goal line carries. That's the difference for James Cook. It's those goal line carries he was getting early season. If he's not getting them now, it knocks him down. So that's kind of fair. So you're rounding out your roster. You're giving it a little bit more depth because I would be moving Olave and redraft in all my redraft leagues because you don't know when he's coming back. So like I like this deal to overall your depth. It's just, are you content with losing Henry? That's the biggest question mark because Henry's the RB1 right now. He's going to be borderline that the rest of the year. So that's the question, right? Let's go to Grimaniac. Yeah, I mean, if you'll read the article on fantasyfootballuniverse.com, go check it out. Jalen Coker is on the guys I like. The issue was they decided to showcase Jonathan Mingo so they could trade him. That's what happened last week because he went down to 49% from 65% of like the routes run, right? So it's tough with Coker, but I think he's a good player. I want to, like in deeper leagues or leagues where I have a bunch of bench spots, I want to stash Jalen Coker to see how it goes because when he's been on the field, he's been good, he's been productive. He is kind of that like the big slot. And the issue is they have Adam Thielen. So that's what I want to see. But in a lost year, like what's the point of rolling Thielen out there? If I was Carolina Panthers, my 2 wide receivers on the field at all times, the Xavier Leggett, and it would be Jalen Coker. Now, are they going to do that? I don't know, but I think he's worth stashing. Also, Audric Estimate, I think, like Javonte's been incredibly disappointing, right? So it really depends how deep your league is and what you're willing to invest on those guys. I don't mind throwing a few bucks to each of those guys, seeing how it goes. Because you're kind of investing into variance. I think Estimate, he's a rookie that they've hyped up the entire like offseason talking about him. He hasn't hit yet, but like there's potential with him to like. I think like best case scenario, he takes Javonte's role. Obviously, I don't know how likely that is, but you kind of want to stash these type of running backs who like they show that they can do good things for you and see how it works out. Because if an injury happens, if Javonte goes down, he steps right into that role and does that for you. So you got Flowers, Smith, Olave, Leggett, Pop Douglas. Yeah, like I don't think you need to pick up either one of those guys. Like you're pretty set with that wide receiver room because are you going to start? I guess my question is, are you going to start either Jennings or QJ over Pop Douglas? That's the question you have. If you're gonna play those guys over him, pick him up. If they're just going to sit on your bench, then no, I would not do that. So that's really how it depends on your rosters. It's 14-man league, so it's a little bit deeper. I get it. But like Pop's a super high floor play as long as Drake May's the quarterback. If Drake May's the quarterback, Pop's getting targets. He's going to be involved. So I like Pop. I think he's a good player. I would prefer Pop just based on that. But if you want to take a ceiling shot, I think Jennings and QJ give you a higher ceiling shot. So it really depends on how you want to structure your roster. Yeah. The thing with James Cook is people just don't like him that much. And I'm a James Cook stan, but people just are not a big James Cook fan. So like they kind of have issues with him. So you're never going to get peak value. But yeah, that's the thing. So you could maybe add a third piece into that. If you throw James Cook, you're gonna have to throw in another like decent piece right on that roster if you're not gonna give up Henry because Nacua is a stud and Garrett Wilson's a really, really good wide receiver. Both of those guys are. They're very valuable. So if you're doing a deal like that, it's gonna be hard to do it with Cook, I will say, as opposed to Henry, because Henry has a name cachet, he has the juice and everything. People are still like on the fence about James Cook because of his role and everything. So, I would kind of keep that in mind. Like, let me look at your roster. I know you posted it earlier. Like, you could maybe throw in Irving on top of Cook, see if that gets it done, or somewhere like, because you're not really going to play Irving. So you could do something like that. Then you do like CMC, Irving, Olave. But the problem is that really limits your running back depth. And I don't want to give a BTJ. I don't want to give him McLaurin. I don't want to give an ARSB. But you kind of have to pick and choose your spot. So maybe You could do ASRB instead of Henry if you want to keep Henry, but do you really want to trade ASRB? I just don't think there's much of a difference between ARSB and Puka Nacua myself. So if you view it as an upgrade, then you can do something like that. I think there's ways to make this deal work, but it's going to be kind of uncomfortable if you're not including Henry, because you're going to have to put a very valuable piece on top of it, right? So it really comes down to how you value Henry. If you want the RB1 and the guy that's going to be a top 5 running back at a minimum, just keep Henry. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's just trying to move Olave, you have to package him with a really good asset when you're moving into that Puka tier of players, right? Because Puka's awesome. Like, as long as he's healthy on the field, like, you know he's going to ball out in that offense, because Stafford is these immobile quarterbacks. They just consistently support these guys. All right, we are rolling through this. We're almost at a half hour already, so I'm going to get through this a little bit faster. Half PPR. What do you think of the straight offer? Pretty desperate for even a half decent running back. So I've offered Tank Bigsby and Tucker Traff for Rachaad White. Yeah, you have Ingram. That's fine. Yeah, like Bigsby is the most game script dependent running back in the NFL, quite possibly. Like, he needs to be in like winning situations where they have the lead. Otherwise, he's coming off the field. So if you could package these guys for Rachaad White and that team needs a tight end, I think it's fine. It's maybe a little bit steep just because of where Tucker Craft is, but I don't mind it. You're getting in like an RB2, a guy that's more of a floor play than anything else, but I definitely prefer him to take Bigsby. So it may seem like a loss in like a trade calculator sense, but it makes your team better because you have Ingram, right? So yeah, I'm fine doing a deal like that. Yeah, so you have Mixon, Bijan, Bigsby as your running backs. Yeah, I mean, you can make the case for all of these guys. I'm not going to do Trey Sermon. He's just not good. Cam Akers is strictly a handcuff, so like you're not playing Cam Akers. I would target Trey Benson because Connor left with an injury and Connor's probably going to miss some time at some point. That's just changed Connor's life. Or I'd pick Estime if you think he's going to play a role. Like, my whole thing with Bigsby is like, it's just so tough to even start him at the moment because you don't know how these game scripts are going to go. They're going to be trailing in the majority of these games, so it's really hard to think him getting, like a couple weeks ago, he had 20 plus carries. I don't see that happening anytime soon for him, right? So you have Mixon, you have Bijan. You're set with those two. It's about finding another guy that you could bring into as a flex play because Bigsby is just super game script dependent, and that's what's scary about him. He was good while he lasted. It's going to be tough. And, like, you know, they have ETN. It's just, I mean, Keaton Mitchell, like, it's kind of a similar bet. You just hope it works out. Yeah, like, you could do that if you wanted to. Yeah, like, I would prefer Estimate over Benson because Estimate, I think, has a better path to playing than Benson. Like, we've seen it with James Conner when he's healthy. Like, Benson's nothing. Like, he gets no work, right? With Estimate, there's a better pathway for him. And they're both limited as far as the upside, too. Like, Estimate's not going to have the passing down work. That's Shalom McLaughlin. Trey Benson's not going to have the passing down work. That's Amari DiMercado, right? So it's kind of a similar bet between these two guys. So it really depends on just how you prefer those guys. I know people like Benson. I've never really been a Benson guy. Like, he's about 80% complete on what you want from a running back. He can break big plays. I think Estimate is the much more sound running back who does what you need. Benson will make bad reads and it will cost him. But he's that boom bust rusher where he can also house it 60 yards. Estimate can't really do, right? So you're going to have to pick and choose what you want. All right. Let's go to running backs. We will get there. Give me 1 second as I hold the screen. All right. Running backs, deeper league. It's Jalen Wright, folks. Like, I know my co-host, Jeremy, FF_Rebel, loves Mr. Raheem Mostert. I do not. My issue with Raheem Mostert is he fumbled last week. And they were like, yo, just sit the bench. They brought in Jalen Wright because Jalen Wright's been more explosive. He's been just a better running back. And I think he also has two pathways to relevance for you. If an injury happens to either one of these guys, so if Mostert goes down or HN goes in, he can kind of slot into either of those roles. The way I think it works better is when he plays the Mostert role in 2025. Like, they're going to let Mostert walk because he's like the oldest running back in the NFL. They have HN doing his thing, and then they have Jalen Wright playing the nice like 1B role along HN. I think that works. I still think based on how their season is going, like, he could take the job from Raheem Mostert. So this is why I really like Jalen Wright. And if he's on the field for Miami, like, that offense produces points for fantasy. Like, is what these running backs. So I would go do that. The other guys in this tier, like we talked about Trey Benson, he's at 23% rostered. Blake Corum with the Rams, 22% rostered. Audrey Estime, we talked about him, 5% rostered. And Khalil Herbert, who just got traded to the Cincinnati Bengals, he is at 8% rostered. So yeah, I would pick these guys up in deeper leagues and see how it goes. You don't really want like deeper wide receivers because it's so hard for them and you're not starting them because most people have more wide receiver depth, even though this year's been a disaster. But the running backs are always the play to go to because it's just much easier for them to be on the field. Because if they're on the field, the points are much likely to happen for them because that's how it works for running backs, unlike wide receivers who have to earn targets, right? The next guy in the 26 to 50% tier, the medium tier, talking about Jaylen Warren. This is what I was talking about Jaylen Warren earlier. he's already playing a decent role alongside Najee. Najee's been really good on the ground. But what Jalen Warren does is Jalen Warren is that pass catching back. He's still been that pass catching back. He's going to do that. And these games are going to be down. They're going to be trailing. Like I said earlier about Jalen Warren, there is a chance he is the guy that gets more snaps or touches in this game. Like, because if they're trailing throughout, like, and he's the 2-minute back too, they're still going to have Najee's going to have like that goal line usage, like at least. I think it's more of like a split where it could be 55-45. Maybe it flips the other way. And like it's super game trips about that. I really want Debo. I really like Debo. Now, if you're worried about the injury, I get it, but I'm a big Debo fan. I think he's awesome. And particularly like with the loss of Brandon Ayuk, with Debo, man, like it's Debo to the moon. His usage has been awesome when healthy. Now, if you're worried about CMC, I get it. But like I'm valuing Debo as a borderline mid-range wide receiver one the rest of the way. It's just health and concern. So I would personally hold Debo unless you're getting like a very valuable piece for him. If you're packaging him up in one of those elite running backs, like I get it. Like if you're going after the Chains of the world, those type of guys, understandable. When you're into this other tier, like I'm just a big Debo guy. So like my bias is there. I think Debo's special. He's built for fantasy points and like in our leagues. That's what he does. So I like him a lot. I'm going to get to your question there a little bit first. Let me finish these running backs and we'll answer these questions. The other guys in this tier, Tyler Allgeier's 47%. You know the pathway for him. Like if an injury happens to Bijan. Braylon Allen, same scenario, 45% roster with the Jets. If an injury happens to Brees, skyrockets. The next guy, Ray Davis, 25% rostered. He's much easier to get. He's the cheapest of this group. So if you're targeting someone out of this group, it's more than likely not that Ray Davis is available. 25% rostered. He's already playing a role alongside James Cook. If an injury happens to James Cook, then you know like it's Ray Davis, right? Because the offense is really good. The thing is, he's kind of like a light version of Jalen Warren. What I mean by that, he's kind of already on the field playing a role. He's not as involved as Jalen Warren is, but he can still give you some from week to week. Like if games get out of hand, because Buffalo's one of the best teams in the NFL, and they're up ahead, this is how they get there, right? So I like Ray Davis a lot. And the last guy, Justice Hill, you know that he's the old school like Danny Woodhead. He's the PPR monster. They need to be in like these certain game scripts for it to work out. But we've seen it. He could pop off at certain game scripts where he's at 30% roster is good. The guy that is in the small tier, basically the most rostered leagues, it's Tyrone Tracy, 75% rostered. So it's more than likely not available that he is. But if by any chance he's available, go get Tyrone Tracy. You notice we talked about Daniel Jones earlier. We love Tyrone Tracy. The schedule is muddy for Tyrone Tracy, just as it was for Daniel Jones. These defenses they're playing are not good against quarterback. They're not good against running back. He gets Carolina this week. I would not be shocked if he has 150 yards rushing against this team. He's awesome. It's really good, right? Their defense gives up more points per game to the running backs that they play than Derrick Henry has scored per game. It's a juicy matchup, right? Like since taking the job from Devin Singletary, he's established himself as a locked-in RB2, weekly RB1 upside, and I think he has that this next few weeks. So I really like Singletary. I like Singletary. I really like Tyrone Tracy. I think he's really good. The other guy, Jonathan Brooks, finally getting activated. So Jonathan Brooks will be the second guy this year. Rico Dowdle, 72%. I like him. It's just bringing a lower floor and lower ceiling. But he had his best game of the year. I think he's going to be heavily used. I just think the offense brings it down. So it's much more of a volume play than anything else. But you know what? Volume for running backs. We've seen Alexander Madison pop off for a few weeks, and I like Alexander Madison. He's at 70%. You can do that. Now, before we get to the wide receivers, I'm going to answer this question really quick. So, thanks for waiting for Zill. Yeah, you have Otton and Ferguson. You could try to package them with Bigsby. Absolutely. I really don't want to trade Cade Otton. Like, Cade Otton for these next until Mike Evans comes back is borderline tight end one, like the tight end one. They don't have any pass catchers that are really pushing in this offense and the way it's structured right now with Baker. It's Cade Otton and it's the running backs, man. You're getting a little bit here from Sterling Shepard, different than these other guys. Raheem Jarrett made a little bit, but overall, it's running through Cade Otton in the passing game. He's awesome. So if you could trade Ferguson in a package deal, if you're trading Otton in the package deal, you better be getting a freaking producer. Like, you better be getting a high-end producer because Otton's one of the few guys that gives you an edge. He's basically doing what George Kittle's been doing all year. Like, that's how good Cade Otton has been since the Evans and Godwin injuries happened. And even when Evans comes back, like, you're still missing a giant chunk from this offense with Godwin. So Otton's going to be a top 12 tight end rest of the season. Like, he's going to be in that range. It'll just come down a little bit from, like, basically a top 3-4 tight end, right? So he's going to be, like, more of a mid to back end tight end, but still super value. Ferguson, I'm more worried about because this offense takes a massive hit with the Cowboys, so I would much prefer to trade Ferguson. So if people are valuing them the same, do Ferguson. It's going to be much more valuable for you. let us go and talk to the next position, wide receivers in deeper leagues. So let me pull up the little screen here 1 second. All right, so now we're talking about wide receivers. In deep league, 0-25% rostered on Sleeper. Demarcus Robinson is the guy I want. You could do Jalen Polk, who's at 10%. You could do Noah Brown, who's at 6% roster. You could do Tutu Atwell. Interestingly enough, I have 2 Rams here. You'll see why I have 2 Rams here. Offense is awesome. The last guy, Jalen Coker, is at 16% roster. Now, he went off last week to Demarcus Robinson. He finishes the wide receiver 4. And the thing about Robinson is we saw this last year with both Puka and Cup on the field from weeks 13 to 18 last year. He averaged 12.9 points per game. That's good. That was wide receiver 31 during that stretch. I think he's valuable. I think he can do this. The key with him and why he struggled earlier is because when he's the wide receiver 1, he's not good enough to be the guy that you focus the offense on because he can take it away. When he's the wide receiver 3 in offense, it's much more easier for him to produce and do that. So that's why I like him in the most in this tier because I think the floor is high and he can give you that boom bust. Like he's a boom bust wide receiver 3 in that range. Like I like him each and every week, and especially with some of these matchups that the Rams play, like it's wheels up. So I get it. It's not for everybody with Demarcus Robinson, but I think he's just a really good player, man. It's just what you do, right? They have Miami this week, not the best matchup, but they have New England, they have Philadelphia, they have New Orleans. These defenses have taken a hit. I could see Demarcus Robinson popping off in a few of these matchups for you guys. Before we go on to the middle tier of wide receivers, I'm going to ask this question from Tyler. Tyler, yeah, Mike Williams. If you're in deeper leagues, take a shot on Mike Williams, see how it goes. I think it's really hard for him to hit a ceiling in the Pittsburgh offense because he's going to command some targets. He just wasn't doing much of anything with New York, right? Because they brought in a better version. Like they brought in Devontae Adams to go alongside Garrett Wilson. They're like, we don't need you. So it wasn't traded for much. I think he massively upgrades that wide receiver room in Pittsburgh because they have the ghost of nothingness. We're talking about Van Jefferson. We're talking about just like Roman Wilson, the ghost of Roman Wilson who's been on IR, done nothing like that. That wide receiver room with Calvin Austin and stuff, it's just not very good outside of George Pickens. So Mike Williams gives them another quality NFL wide receiver. I think it can be fine. I don't know what the ceiling is, right? So that's my question. I don't see him being a wide receiver 2. I think he can get you there sometimes, but he's a wide receiver 4 with upside. Like I'm not a big Mike Williams fan just in general because the way he plays is very similar to what George Pickens does. They're both downfield threats who win contested catches with these situations, and Mike Williams just the thing about Mike Williams is he always falls incredibly hard on every play. So that's why he always hurts himself. Like you see him goes up, he doesn't know how to fall and just breaks his hip or whatever it is. And yeah, Khalil Herbert, talk about him in Cincinnati. Like he's going to be an early down grinder in this offense. They like Chase Brown, but how this works out is Khalil Herbert is not a pass catcher, like at all. Like that's not what he does. So I think these roles kind of like switch a little bit where it's in Cincinnati, they have Chase Brown doing a little bit more pass protection and like that and getting more passing down work. And they give the work between the 20s, the ugly work on like the first downs and these runs, they give it to Khalil Herbert. I don't know how much usage he's going to get. Obviously, I much prefer Chase Brown. He's been good. He's been really good in that situation. He's continually improving from like last year to this year. It's a massive increase in how good he's been. Like what he's doing for that team, like that's super valuable. But they had nobody else on this roster they could trust. So they had to move on. They're like, we can't do Zach Moss. He's going to be done for the year. What they're doing is they're going to trust Khalil Herbert and see how it goes. So I like both of these guys in deeper leagues. I'm much more interested in Khalil Herbert because I think it's easier for him. If an injury happens to Chase Brown, that's just a much easier pathway to him producing for you. And he's been a good rusher his entire career. So I think we're going to see that in Cincinnati immediately. The rushing numbers and efficiency is always going to be there. Hopkins, T. Higgins. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with Tyreek Hill because the floor has come down. But, like, T. Higgins has been awesome this year. It's just you have to live with the injuries. So, as crazy as it sounds, I don't know if I'm taking the Tyreek Hill side of this deal. Like, usually I go for that. I'm not a big Jordan Addison guy. Jordan Addison also has TJ Hawkinson coming back where he's going to get some, like, he's going to push him. And we saw this last year. Like, TJ Hawkinson was out targeting, but doing really good. If we just look back to last year's stats when TJ Hawkinson was healthy. And we saw what DeAndre Hopkins did. Like, DeAndre Hopkins could do this week in and week out. Like, he could be a solid wide receiver, too, before he's connected to Patrick Mahomes. So I don't think that's really that of a downgrade. And what we've seen from T. Higgins is T. Higgins improving, like, at what he does with deep balls and contested catches. He's one of the best in the NFL at doing that, right? So if you want to take the upside shot with Tyreek Hill and hope he gets back to that high-end wide receiver one, but I think he's more back-end wide receiver one. So, like, the difference from him and T. Higgins is not that much, and it really comes down to just if you value Hopkins or Addison. I think I'm probably going to hold, but which is kind of wild to say that out loud because Tyreek Hill was in contention for the 101. I think it's a much safer side. I will say that. Like the side you have is much safer. I think the upside is truly on the Tyreek Hill side. If you want to take the bet on Tyreek and see if he can be back to that wide receiver one, I don't know if it's possible. So I'm not as bullish as Tyreek Hill as I was last year. So that one worries me a little bit. So yeah, I think you might be able to aim a little bit higher than Tyreek Hill, but like we're seeing wide receiver. I would go for the Nico Collins. I would go for those guys. Like I would go for Jamar Chase. I would not CeeDee Lamb anymore, but I would go for like a lot of those guys, like the high end. Because like if we're talking the Puka, I'm probably going to prefer Puka to Tyreek Hill. Like that's just where I'm at with those guys. So that shows you where I'm at with Tyreek Hill. Like he's like probably going to be like top 12 wide receiver. That's where I'm at. Yeah, man. Thanks for joining us, Andrew. I appreciate it. Let's go back to these wide receivers. In medium leagues, Xavier Leggett. In back-to-back weeks, he's seen over 6 targets. He's demonstrated he is the focal point of the passing attack. Now, there is limitations to this passing attack, but why I have him above a Demario Douglas, above a Jalen McMillan, above a Quentin Johnston, Ricky Pearsall is not showing it yet. I think he's a better, I think Ricky Pearsall is a really good player. It's just, I think it's going to take him a while for Joe in that offense to do this thing. I like him. I think it's very similar bet with a lot of these guys. I just think Xavier Leggett does not have competition, particularly if Jalen Coker is only playing 40% of snaps, right? So I think Xavier Leggett gives you a little bit more upside than the rest of these guys. The downside with Xavier Leggett is significant. Like he only had 34 yards, like he only had 30 plus yards back-to-back games. So it's not like he's getting a ton of yards. But I think he can get there in PPR leagues because he's going to get receptions. He's going to get targets. Like they just don't have weapons on that offense. That's the thing. So that's why I like him. And I always bet on young, promising rookies because second half of the season is when we see these guys take off. So that's why you see Ricky Pearsall this year. That's why you see Xavier Leggett this year. I always like betting on rookies because as the season progresses, they get more comfortable with their offenses. They gain trust of their coordinators, and that's incredibly, that's the thing that makes the difference for them. And you can do that. I mean, we're seeing in year 2 guys come on, like Quentin Johnston's doing his thing. Like Jalen McMillan is also a rookie, but he's dealing with an injury. So I had Jalen McMillan higher, but I like Jalen McMillan as well. We're going to go to the shallow leagues. The guys at 51 to 70%. 75% of leagues that are rostered, it's Cedric Tillman. I don't know why he's only at 68% of rosters. Man. Like, what are we doing here with Cedric Tillman? He's a guy you drop all the fat on. Like, you throw the bag at Tillman if he's available. I'm not expecting him to be available. And when we do this in like the shallow leagues, it's really just like high profile guys that are for some reason are below roster thresholds. He's going to jump up this week, probably into 85-90% of rosters. Like I would imagine. Dude, Tillman's been awesome. Since Mark Cooper has been traded and he's no longer on the team, he is second in expected points per game and second in points per game. I know we were talking about this on like the Sunday Sid Start show where Jeremy's trying to trade him. I'm not trying to trade him. He has a 23% target share in that offense with an 8 out of 13 yards. Like that's the ideal match of you're going downfield, but you're also getting targets, and they're chucking it a ton here. So this is why I really like Cedric Tillman. If there's a chance you could buy low on Cedric Tillman, go do it. I think he's going to be a very good person. I know the schedule sucks. Like, I understand that. But they're passing at such a high rate, it kind of offsets that. Because we saw last week, like, yeah, double-digit targets. He got there, got a touchdown, 60-plus yards. Like, I think he can do that week in a week out. He could be at least double-digit point producer for that and go from there. So we'll do that. We're going to move on. Before we do that, I'm going to talk about the other guys in this tier. Romeo Dobbs, 75%. You know what you're doing. Tyler Lockett, 73%. It is a buy, so you're not going to be able to play Tyler Lockett. But long-term, with the DK Metcalf injury, you know how it's going to work out. We've seen the Seahawks offense. It's been very boom-bust because the line is just atrocious, but it is there. And the other guy, Jerry Jeudy, he's still involved. They're getting a ton of targets. I get it. It's not Tillman. He's not as good as Tillman. But when you're getting this many targets in an offense, like you just want those guys, right? So before we move on to tight ends, this last category, I got one question to answer. All right, so we have Brooke on the IR. Devonta Smith, Kincaid, Burrow, Mason. Harris Coleman. Yeah, I would drop Mason for any of these guys. McCaffrey's coming back. And we don't know when Mason's coming back because also, like, he's dealing with an injury. So all expectations are that McCaffrey is going to be back this week and playing. I just threw McCaffrey into my lineups that I had him on. The expectation is he's going to be back. All the news is positive with McCaffrey. So the only way I would hold on to Jordan Mason is if you heard news this next couple of days, which, I mean, waivers should run today, so it's not really going to happen. But I'm fine cutting him for a lot of these guys. Like, I take the high upside shots on any players that you need. Because, like, your running back room, like, it's not the best. Like, that seems – well, where's your starters? Because this is your bench, right? So I'm curious who your starters are. But, yeah, I would drop him no, I would drop him for Brooks for sure. Like, I would ride it with Brooks and see how it goes. I just think it's an easier pathway for him. They like Brooks. You're going to have to activate him this week, so we're going to find out one way or the other. I'm still in on Brooks. I'm fine rolling with that just because I don't expect much from Mason moving forward. So he basically needs an injury, and then he's also dealing with injury himself. He's had multiple injuries the last couple of weeks, so it's been kind of rough for him. So yes, I would do that. Of these guys, yeah, like Jameis Winston for sure. The pass rate, and there's such high variance in that offense. Like you kind of want to attack that because the upside is there. I don't see the upside with Bryce Young, and I certainly don't see the upside with Cooper Rush. So I would go Jameis Winston, Bryce Young, Cooper Rush. I just like these backup quarterbacks that are not good, and this is Cooper Rush. Like they worry me. I think it's really close between Bryce Young and Cooper Rush, but yeah, Jameis Winston for sure. He's your fourth QB. It's like a super flex best ball. Like you're fine with Jameis Winston, like because he's the ideal kind of like late round quarterback you take because you want those spike weeks. Like that's what you want in best ball. That's what Jameis Winston does. So I would go with Jameis Winston. All right, we're gonna go tight ends. Tight ends is really quick with tight ends, man. There's not much going on there. Tight ends in deep league. So 25% rostered. It's Mike Gesicki. 20% rostered. He's more than likely available. He's a priority waiver ad because the difference with T. Higgins and without T. Higgins is massive. Like 19% target share without T. Higgins on the field. When T. Higgins is on the field, Gesicki gets 5% targets. That shows you what it is. And this really just comes down to Jamar Chase moving from the slot, which he's playing a lot of slot this year. He goes outside, and Gesicki just slots in the big slot because he's not a traditional tight end. He's more of this like power slot. Like that's what Gesicki does. He moves. I've heard a lot of people say he moves like a boat. He's not a quick movement guy, but he can build up speed. He could play that power slot kind of like movement tight end stuff. That's what he does well. It really fits his skill set personally. So like, and now he's connected to Joe Burrow, the best quarterback he's played with, right? So that's kind of the thing and how he thrives. So if T. Higgins is off the field, which we expect this week, he's dealing with an injury. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Like I'm gonna play Gesicki in my life. So if you don't have him, go get Gesicki. I think he's a really good ad. Outside of Mike Gesicki, you could do Javion Sanders. Has looked good in 3 out of the last 4 games with Carolina. Like they need weapons. This is why we're buying into that offense. Like you'll notice like Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, like Jatavian Sanders. I'm just trying to buy into that offense to see who survives, like who takes that forward. Theo Johnson. With the Giants, 5% rostered. This is more of a dart throw. I'm not really bullish on Theo Johnson, but if you're desperate in deeper leagues, you could make the case for Theo Johnson just because there's not many pass catchers in that offense. Like Wan'Dale Robinson's taking a step back. Like they like Darius Slayton, but it's Malik Neighbors. They're just looking for a player that gives a little something. That's Theo Johnson, right? Jonnu Smith's been good. He's 19% rostered. You could do the Jonnu Smith thing. I think he gives you a shot. They're featuring him at like a rate we haven't seen in a long time. Like that McDaniel's offense is for some reason they're prioritizing the tight end. So I don't mind Jonnu Smith. I prefer him. He's my second favorite one outside Gesicki. You could do that. And lastly, Will Disley, 3% rostered. He's the starting tight end connected to the like Justin Herbert offense. Sometimes it's that simple. Medium leagues, 26 to 50% rostered. I see your question. I'm gonna get to it, IP. So just give me 1 minute and I'll answer your question. Back to this, we are talking about Taysom Hill, 31% rostered sleeper leagues. This offense is bereft of talent right now. Like they're having MVS come off the street and running like important routes for them. That's where they're at. They've lost 4 wide receivers. Their top 4 wide receivers all gone. Now Olave, we expect to be out a long period of time. He should come back, but like they have lost a lot of guys. Like Tipped his deal with an injury. Like these guys, Cedric Wilson, they've all dealt with injuries. It's rough down there. They need any type of playmaker. Taysom Hill is a Swiss Army knife. He's the kind of the guy at the office that can do a little bit of everything. Like if you ever have someone in the office, like you go to them whenever you need stuff figured out. Like that's Taysom Hill. That's what he does because he can give you carries, he can give you receptions, he can give you pass attempts, he can get goal line opportunities. Jamal Williams is also expected to be out, so this is why we like Jamal Williams. This is why we like him for Jamal Williams because he's going to play that goal line role and give you some snaps. And we saw it last week. Like this is what he does. The other guys in this tier. Hunter Henry, I think Hunter Henry rest of season is a better bet than Taysom Hill, but I like Taysom Hill for this week because Hunter Henry has been good connected to Drake May. Now, I will say it's not super high ceiling, but it's a high floor. So if you're looking for points, you can't do Taysom Hill. I'm fine trotting Hunter Henry out as like a back end tight end one each and every week. Isaiah Likely, the shine's really worn off for Isaiah Likely. I know after week 1, people were taking him in like the 4th round of startup drafts, like doing crazy stuff. Noah Fant, 25% roster with the Seahawks. Sorry. And Colby Parkinson, 24% roster. You kind of know the bet with those guys. Fant's fine, and particularly with Metcalf out, I think he gives them something. But he's also dealing with an injury. It's a bye week. You don't know when he's coming back. But I think he's worth the roster. Shallow leagues. These are 50 to 75% rostered. Most of these guys are gone in leagues. The weird thing about sleeper leagues is nobody's rostered in this range. It's everybody's at like 80 to 90%, or they're well below. So there's really only 3 guys that fit this criteria across all sleeper leagues. It's Dallas Goedert. He crept back in the 75%. We had the K. Dottons. We had the other guys. elevate past this group of players where they're in the 80+%. A couple guys are at 78, but 75% roster, that's our limit, so we can't do anything else. Dallas Goedert, he's connected to the Eagles offense. He's a really good pass catcher. Now, it's going to be super boom bust for him, but like when we're chasing tight end production, I don't really care about the floor. Because if you're going up against the Brock Bowers of the world, you're going up against the Kate Ottens of the world, you're going against the George Kittle of the world, right? David Njoku when he's healthy. Like, you need guys that can give you something similar. Because if you're getting 4 punch from your tight end, does that really help you? No. You want guys that can push in that 15, 20 punch per game, because that's how you win weeks at tight end. It's been very weird this year, but I would do that. He's the top guy in this range. It's just he's very much the spiky guy. Another guy, Zach Ertz, he's the freaking oldest man alive. Like, he just commands targets. I know he had a bad week last week. I'm not too worried about Zach Ertz. More of a floor play than anything else. And Dalton Schultz. With Nico Collins being out, I'm curious to see. He is expected to come back. But if Nico Collins is out again, Dalton Schultz is probably going to give you 6 more targets again this upcoming week. So keep an eye on Schultz. You don't have to make a waiver bid on him, but just keep an eye on him. If Nico Collins does not come back or something happens in his ramp up, you can do Dalton Schultz. So that's it, folks. That's the tight ends. We're going to go back to these questions here. So one sec. All right, yeah. So starters: Hurts, Cup, Lamb, Neighbors, Mixon, Barkley. Yeah, that's a really good group. Yeah. So for you, I'm taking a shot on Brooks, right? Because I'm taking the upside shot on Brooks with Mason. I'm not worried about the floor, like with either one of these guys, because it's really hard for either one of these guys to play. Like, you have Mixon and Barkley, top 5 running backs. You have 3 really, really good wide receivers. You have Hurts, who's the top 5 quarterback, and Hawkinson. Like, I'm taking the upside shot. So yeah, I would do that. Should you start BTJ or T. Higgins? Well, you'll know this week early because T. Higgins is not expected to play. They play Thursday, so you're going to get your answer one way or the other. If T. Higgins plays, I'm going to want to play him. With BTJ, it's super up or down. I really like T. Higgins, what he's been, but I might just wait it out and just go with BTJ because he gives you really high floor and high ceiling as well, too. And you could just wait it out. So if we get news that T. Higgins is going to play, but it's on a limited snap count, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. I know it worked out with Puka, but that was super efficiency. That's super rare. And then what happens like this week? Like, we have guys come back from injuries. They play next to nothing. Like, Deontay does nothing because he's on a new team. So it's really tough in situations like that. So you just have to be careful. I'm just going to say BCJ is much safer, but we're going to know Thursday. Like, I think T. Higgins, so I think you're just going to default to BCJ. If Aaron Rodgers is starting quarterback to replace Dak, but the guy I'm playing has Adams. Garrett Wilson. I wouldn't worry too much about this. I think Stafford's really good. Stafford has a really good matchup. So I know Aaron Rodgers, like, he's been really good. You could do Drake May as well. I don't care about, like, I get what the thesis is of, like, those receivers are score point. Aaron Rodgers score points for you, right? Like, that's the way we're going about this. But overall, I wouldn't worry about that. I would just play the guy you think gives you the best chance to win. Because if you're parsing between those, there's not much difference between those two guys. So it just kind of is what it is, right? So overall, I haven't finalized my rankings yet, but I can kind of give you the projections of what we're looking at and go from Aaron Rodgers is fine this week. I prefer Stafford. The matchup against Miami does not. I'm not worried about it, but it's basically back-to-back rankings. The Drake May stuff, he's gonna have to run for his life this week because he's playing the Bears defense. The Bears defense is very good. So this week I'm lower on Drake May, even though I think you can get a good floor from him because the rushing, like, he almost had 100 yards rushing around, so you could do that. But I'm gonna have Stafford, Rodgers, and then Drake May this week. I think that's how it goes. So yeah, if you don't think you get any advantage this week from Stafford, though, check out Aaron Rodgers' schedule. It's juicy the rest of the season. So I would play, matchups to go with those guys. Would I give up Kate Otten, Flowers, Smith, Murray for JT Hurts and Debo? So definitely prefer Hurts and Murray. Debo over Flowers. The Devonta Smith plus in this deal is a lot. So that's what I'm kind of worrying about. Like, and you're also losing there. You're getting JT, so you're getting a running back, and you're getting two wide receivers. Yeah. I mean, you're getting the high-end impactors. So the one thing that sucks, I know we talked about this earlier. Who's your tight end? Because that's the thing that's going to matter. Because if you're getting up Kate Otten, you better have a really, really good tight end. I think it was Ferguson, right? So you could do it with Ferguson. I wouldn't want to give up on him in this deal, but yeah, I'm fine doing this type of deal with, like, you're packaging Flowers and Smith for, like, Debo. Basically, that's how this works. Yeah, like, I'll make this move to go get, like, Hurts. The thing with JT is he's coming back from injury. He's been good. it's tight. It's very tight because I like how a lot of this is. If you have the depth for it, go for it. If you don't, like, you just keep your guys. I think it's a really good deal overall, right? Like, I think it works kind of for both. Yeah, I mean, it's understandable, but like, also with T. Higgins in the past, this has been the same scenario. He's at another plane this year. He's playing the best ball of his career. It's just dealing with injury. So if he's dealing with injury, he gets limited snap count. That's what kind of worries me. You're 4-5, so yep, I get you. You got Burrow, Kyle. It's a good QB room. Like, you have H. Brees. Like, that's a really good running back to tandem. Nico, Neighbors, T, and then Dobbins is your RB3. McClung. Yeah, I mean, like, that's a really good roster. Is this a shallow? Like, this is a shallow league. I'm assuming it is. Is that why you're 4-5, or you just have teams going bananas against you? Because it could be one of those two, right? Like, I'm looking at this roster overall. There's been a lot of injuries. You dealt with a lot of stuff. Like, HN was just unusable for a month. Like, Nico's been out. Like, you've got Neighbors kind of come down. So, like, I get it how this scenario works out where your team's 4-5. Overall, you just have to trust the process with this team. Like, with Kyler, it's weird. Like, I wouldn't hold that game against them. They just absolutely dominated Chicago. Like, the defense played so much better than I expected. So Kyler didn't have to do much of anything. Overall, though, I kind of just want to play Burrow. Like, I just want to put Burrow in my lineups because their defense is so bad. They have to pass a ton. Yeah, it's an 8-man league. That's why. So, yeah, it makes sense. It's an 8-man league. I was thinking, like, man, this is tough. Yeah, so you kind of have to play your matchups right with those guys. But overall, man, that's a good team. I would not be worried about that team. I wouldn't be fretting about it. You have key impact players at every position, right? So I would not worry. And yeah, like, I'm assuming it's start 3 wide receiver, and that's why you're gonna play BTJ and that, or use a 2 wide receiver and you go from there. That's what it looks like to me. Just doing the math in my head. You got the 2 running backs, the 3rd guy. Yeah, like, you could also flex Dobbins, right? Like, you could flex Dobbins if you want to do that with BTJ. Dobbins has been really good. You could go that route. It's with this matchup. I need to double check the plays. I just forgot it. So give me 1 second. Where is it? Yeah, they're playing Tennessee this week. Like, you could definitely do the Dobbins thing. It's a lower floor. I like the Titans defense is their one aspect that's good. So yeah, you can do Dobbins to go for it. But yeah, man, I appreciate y'all coming with me. I am still at the clinic, as you could tell. So we're gonna wrap up the show. Yeah, that, like, I much prefer those guys in the flex. If you're worried about BTJ, if you're worried about Higgins, just play Terry. Terry's been awesome. Terry's top wide receiver, and then you get Dobbins and you roll with it. You know, he's more of a floor play, I think, against Tennessee. But if he gets a couple touchdowns because the offense has been so good with Herbert, what they're doing. Like, if he gets in the end zone, that's how he gets 20+ points in that game. Like, I think floor play is looking at 10. You could get upwards of 20+ points in this game. It's just, it might be tougher for him to reach against the Tennessee defense because their front is their strength. That's been their strength for years. It's still very good. So we'll see if it holds up. But the offense is so bad, it could put the defense in very bad situations, right? If they turn the ball over a bunch against the Chargers defense, which is vastly improved, that's how it works out. But all right, we're going on an hour here, so we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank y'all for joining me on this episode from your neighborhood clinic. I'm your host, Jesse Bowler, aka JM405. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing our ranking shows, and they will be going through we'll be releasing one a day. We'll start with quarterbacks and ends, we'll do running backs on Thursday, and then on Friday, we'll do the wide receivers. Then we'll have our roundtable show on Saturday. That usually varies. Then on Sunday, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna have a sit-start show, 8:30 my time, 11:30 y'all time, Eastern time. If you have come this far this way and you have not liked and subscribed or commented on anything like that, please do it. We very much appreciate all the support. I think we're over 540 subscribers. We are getting there, folks. It is so nice to see. Like, we're building a community. We love everything we're getting back from you guys, and we just put it back into this, try to make it as good an experience, something you guys are enjoying. So I thank you all for posting all the questions. It was live today. It definitely extended our show. That's just life. That's part of it, right? So yeah. So from this is me for the rest of the fantasy football universe, for Aaron, for Jeremy, and for SC. We're gonna take care. So yeah, have a good one, folks.